And you are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast.
I'm your co-host, Mark, who forgot his name for a second.
At least, hopefully, you don't forget the title of this movie. I'm your co-host, Josh.
And we're talking about Knock at the Cabin. Is that the name of it?
It is the name of the movie, but if you want the name of the book that the movie is based on, it is by Paul Tremblay, and it is called The Cabin at the End of the World. And I will be making many references to it and my discrepancies with this movie. But yeah, this is the latest from M-night-shyamlan.
And Batista.
And Bautista, which
the funny thing is, real quick, when we say that, I saw something this morning talking about that Batista helped keep it more streamlined and basically helped to prevent Shyamalan from being Shyamalan with this movie.
So I don't want to like quite get there yet because I feel like it does venture into spoiler territory, but I'm curious, and I'm sorry if I sound bad. I'm like getting over a cold right now. So
I'm hacking and coughing. I sound like I'm dying.
We push through here at Abyss Gazing. What is your relationship with Shyamalan as a filmmaker? Like, do you love him? Do you hate him? Is he like a hit or miss for you?
I like his movies. I think they're fun for the most part, except for The Last Airbender, which
we don't have to talk. We don't have to talk about that.
Kind of dumb. The grass is going to kill you. Yeah, I have to deal with it every spring. It's called allergies. Outside of those two, for the most part, he's done a lot of good work. I think he had everybody's got some movies that come out that kind of suck. Even James Cameron, who's got Avatar right now, the second one pushing or past 2 billion. He's had a couple flops in his career too. So I think he kind of studios got involved with The Last Airbender, and The Happening was just kind of a flop, with just a bad move. But the rest of his movies, I think, were fairly good. And what was it? The fairy tale one. Can't remember what it's called now. But it was exactly what the story was. And people got mad that it didn't have a twist. But when he puts a twist in it, they throw a fit about him putting a twist in it. So he's kind of one that's, for his first few movies, did really well, but then became a victim of his own success. If he didn't do what he was known for, he was criticized, but then they criticized what he was known for in the newer movies.
So like I agree mostly with what you said. My relationship with Shyamalan is I think he has like a really strong start to his career. He probably has one of the strongest starts. Let me rephrase this for any cinephiles. So Shyamalan has 2 director credits in the early 90s. He has Praying with Anger, and then he has a comedy that he directed with Rosie O'Donnell, of all people, in 1998 called Wide Awake. And he also co-wrote Stuart Little in the late 90s, which a lot of people don't know or like just kind of shock them. But when he gets into like The Sixth Sense, he has probably one of the strongest early film careers of any director. And then you progress into Unbreakable, and you give us not only one of that's a movie that I feel like is ahead of its time, especially now in the climate that we have with superheroes being the lifeblood of the film industry. I feel like Unbreakable captured everything that like The Dark Knight and like the Batman from earlier this year that really grounded a horrifying superhero experience in a very realistic way. It's a great film. Signs is another great film. The Village was okay. Somewhere around The Lady in the Water, he starts to kind of he starts to get a little bit cocky, and that's where I feel like he really starts to fall off as a director. Lady in the Water, I haven't seen. I've heard it's terrible things. I've seen bits and pieces of The Happening. Happening looked like a terrible movie. The Last Airbender is an absolute abomination.
It fell victim to like the Wolverine Origins movie, the same kind of thing, or Mimic with Guillermo del Toro. The, the studios got involved and kept telling him what he needed to change and do this and do that. And he just put out, unfortunately, the movie suffered. I don't think Lady in the Lake or whatever it's called was
Lady in the Water.
whatever, close enough. It has been well established I'm horrible with names, to the point of even forgetting the movie name,
That's
movie
fair.
title. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
absolutely fair.
but I don't think that was him being cocky. I think he put out a movie without a twist because people started criticizing the fact that all he could do with was a movie with a dramatic twist at the end.
Now I have been like so I love Letterbox, and I love the fact that Letterbox gives you an option to put movies on a watch list, and then you can like filter out the streaming services that you have. So once a movie comes available on the streaming services, you get a notification. I love that feature. And Lady in the Water, the only reason that it is currently on my watch list is because of Paul Giamatti. I love that man to death. He is one of my favorite actors, and I just really want to see what he could do in that type of movie because I've never seen him in anything that's like fantasy horror, and I think that he would just crush it. So I am curious about Lady in the Water, but The Last Airbender, I don't feel like it's necessarily the fact that. All right, before I get into this, have you seen the series? Like, what are you like? Are you a fan of the series that the movie's based
Who
off of?
who hasn't seen the series?
Okay, I just want to make sure. Because like my big problem with it isn't necessarily the fact that like Hollywood got involved, because yes, that's very evident. My big thing is the two big factors. They whitewashed the cast, and the second one, it's pronounced Ang, not Ung. It's pronounced Ang. That drove me so incredibly crazy watching that like I just that's why this movie is an abomination to me.
I mean,
Um,
Netflix is putting out a live action Airbender, so
they are, but they're also approaching it in in the way of like paying homage to the series. So like they've cast a their casting is on par with the actual casting of the show. And that's something that I really like, and that's something that I feel like this that really needs. So I am curious about it and probably will watch it. We also, side note, we will also be getting a animated follow-up from the original creators feature film. I think it's either supposed to hit next year or 2025, but it is on the horizon.
sweet.
So, um, but yeah,
But I
I
mean,
go ahead.
in all fairness, though, there's been a big history of kind of poor anime cartoon translations into live action. There aren't a whole lot of them that were done well. Look at Death Note. Death Note. The
Mm,
There was some Japanese ones, live action ones that were decent, which I own. Um, the Kenshin movies are really good. The Rurouni Kenshin movies are really good, but it was just a poor translation, and I think there were too many executives involved in the background of the live action Airbender going, no, it needs to be done this way. This is the way we want it done. That didn't really understand the material they were trying to translate.
yeah, and I think because of that, like Shyamalan really suffered as a director to where like he really had to prove himself again. And
And he kind of did with what was it, Devil? The Devil?
so Devil he produced, but it got a lot of people kind of like saying, all right, maybe this guy's not too far gone. And then he gave us The Visit, which I still haven't seen yet, but then gave
Which one
us
was the visit?
Split. The Visit is like a kid goes to visit her grandma, I think. it turns out to be like something super sinister. Let's see what IMDb says. It says two siblings become increasingly frustrated by their grandparents' disturbing behavior while visiting them on vacation.
I don't know if I've seen that one. But yeah, Split was fantastic.
Yeah, Split is to me to this day is like one of the best modern horror films I've ever seen, and it was pretty straightforward, and then you got that twist at the end that connected it to Unbreakable. And I I don't know how you felt about it. Like, I think that that was a twist that I really liked because it didn't feel like that twist was heavy-handed. Like, it felt natural um in all of its dealings, and that's something that like I really appreciated about the twist of um Split and kind of the connection. Glass was kind of like it was a hit or miss. Like Glass
I
was
liked it.
okay.
I thought it was decent. It was fun. It's set up to have your good guy versus bad guy fight. But they were those three movies, The Unbreakable, Glass, and Split,
Yep.
were done in a manner of what if superheroes were real, using kind of real real life incidences, like multiple personality. I forgot what the modern term is for it.
It's
um
DI it's DID. It's I think it's dissociative
Identity
identity
disorder,
disorder. Let me
something
double
like
check
that.
that.
They change terms on these things every so often and you lose track of what they
Yeah,
are.
so it is dissociative identity disorder. Um, it basically means it's just a disorder characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personality states. Dissociative disorder, previously called multiple personality disorder, is usually a reaction to a trauma as a way to help a person avoid bad memories. Dissociative identity disorder is characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personalities. Each may have a unique name, personal history, and characteristics. Treatment is talk therapy.
Hmm.
And
And Glass's condition is real with the
yeah.
brittle bones.
Hmm.
They even Mass Effect, one of the main characters in the Mass Effect trilogy, had the same condition too, and he was a pilot in the series. Joker had the same kind of brittle bone disease. And then essentially, Bruce Willis's character was just super athletic. Uh, essentially, was his deal, but it was almost the Batman take on superheroes, but a little bit more down to earth.
Yeah. And that's why I will always say that, like, despite my feelings on how that trilogy ended, I think that it is one of the strongest trilogies that we've seen in film. Where like, and my biggest like things with it is like I I have a like my biggest problem with Glass is not necessarily that it's a bad movie. It's just it has a bad ending, I think. Um and
With the order that monitors superheroes or whatever.
yeah, so let's jump into spoiler alert for Knock at the Cabin. So if you guys haven't seen it yet, this is going to be your official spoiler warning. Um I am not going to lie to you. I thought that they missed a huge opportunity here while we're on the subject of the East Rail 77 trilogy to connect Knock at the Cabin to Glass. Because I thought that, like, the as Batista and all the characters keep talking about this like message board, and they keep talking about this like these figures that essentially like connected them together and uh gave them this task to fulfill essentially. I honestly thought that you could have like connected it and it would have been this like the group that organized all of the events of Glass. Like, I think that would have been a cool twist, but this movie didn't necessarily need a twist. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, I mean, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it was based on somebody else's work.
Yeah, and
So you already know they make artistic liberties and decisions with books and material to turn it into a movie. So they could have done that, but how much would it alter the original book, the original material?
well, to answer your question, they completely altered the original the ending of this movie. So in the book, it's actually Leonard dies. He doesn't make it to the end. And it's actually the way that it ends is Wen dies, and it comes down to Eric and Eric and Andrew and Sabrina. And Sabrina basically is tied up and held at gunpoint to take them down to the truck. She then dies, and then Andrew is the sole survivor because Eric sacrifices himself. Um, and so they've already changed the ending of this movie from the original source material. So to like say that they were gonna like have a twist and like connect it to like one of Shyamalan's other universes, honestly, it's like thought I was like, if you're gonna like do a twist already, just commit to it.
I mean, it could have, but then you're building another Marvel universe out of his movies.
I'm
It's
not. I
I was okay with it not being. I didn't even think it should be watching it.
Well, so this movie essentially takes two subgenres of horror. It takes a the home invasion and then the impending apocalypse and kind of merges them together. Uh before we get into like this, how did you like what are your thoughts on this movie? Like, did you like it? Did you hate it?
I liked it. I thought it was pretty decent. It was pretty good. It had its moments. Batista does a lot of fun movies, and he fits his roles for fairly well. But occasionally, some of his roles, he feels like he doesn't quite know how to portray that character, and this happened to be one of those roles. He didn't do a bad job. He just didn't quite fit what he was trying to portray.
Back the heck out of here. Batista is great in this role. I think I agree with you. I think he's always been that actor that's always taken roles that fit him. And I think this is the first time that I would dare say that this is a career best performance for him. And also on top of that, I think that he understood the source material really well because as I was reading the source, because I read it in January. So as I was reading the book, I was like, they would have these like really like just sentimental moments with Leonard and Eric and Andrew and Wen. And you had this like tender touch to them, but you could like understand that he was a masculine guy. And I feel like from someone that read the book, I feel like as far as like the source material translation, I felt like out of all the characters in this movie, I feel like Batiste, Shyamalan and the writers knew Leonard the best. And I felt like Batista also knew him and like where his headspace was. And I think that just like the emotions that like he's able to explore, whether he's being like sincere or he's being really vulnerable. I think we've never seen Batista in a role like this. I think he absolutely crushes it with what he's given here.
I don't know. I mean, have you seen C with him and Jason Momoa?
I haven't. So like that's also something that I will also preface that I've only ever seen his movies. So I've seen Glass Onion, I've seen Guardians, I've seen uh Dune, I've seen Blade Runner, and I think for like Dune and Blade Runner, like he definitely exhibits exceptional dramatic work, but I think he's able to expand it on a platform here at Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah, he's season two, I think, of C. He's got a role that plays out through the main story, and he's really good at that. He did do a really good job with Drax, which is what everybody knows. He was okay with was it Army of the Dead? He was pretty good there. He
Yeah,
kind
I
of
forgot about that one.
he fit the role, but that was another one I felt that he seemed just a little flat on it, performance wise.
I,
I and this one kind of fell right there. I'm not saying he did a bad job. It felt just a little flat and forced and almost a little awkward at times.
I disagree, and I think as a
I mean,
whole,
it wouldn't be the first time we disagreed on something.
I think also as a whole with this movie, from like reading the book beforehand, I I walked away from this movie not necessarily loving this movie, not necessarily hating this movie. It was like split right down the middle. This movie is an absolute great for me. I saw a TikTok with a creator, and he basically was like, when the caption said when you read the book before seeing the movie, and was talking specifically about Cabin, and he just like, oh man, like I really messed up. And the conversations that I've had since I've walked out of the movie is from people that have seen this movie, and have not read the book, really like it. From people that have read the book and have seen the movie, have been where I am at. Like, it's okay. Like, there are scenes pulled directly from here. There are definitely great characterizations from here. I think it captures the commentary between Eric and Andrew really well, but I was just kind of like really split. But the one thing I can't take away from this movie is how good the performances are across the board. Like, there's not a bad performance in this movie.
But did they really need to have Ron Weasley getting beaten like a redheaded stepchild?
You know, that's the thing that I don't understand about Rupert Grint right now. And for those that don't know, I just went through the Harry Potter movies for the first time as an adult. I've never seen them before.
Fantastic.
They're so good. They're so good. And I'm like kicking myself that like I wrote them off for so long. They're one of the best franchises I've ever seen. And
people actually want to have them remade.
Why? Like,
I don't know.
That's my thing is why would you like want to take away greatness like that? Not to say that it will take away or like it'll invalidate the other movies, but I mean, still, like, why?
But Rupert, what's his last name?
Grint.
Grint. He actually has done some other work with Shyamalan before. So he's one of the main characters in, I think it's called The Servant.
Yeah. It's on Apple TV
Plus.
right now.
Yeah, Apple TV, Apple Plus, whatever it's called.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier, but please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
But like he was also in one of the shorts last year for Cabinet of Curiosities, and he like that was the first time that outside of Ron Weasley that I'd seen his acting, and they really did him dirty in this movie, because in the book Redmond is really aggressive. He is like he's a bigot through and through. And I felt like they really missed an opportunity to kind of like explore the tension between like the LGBTQIA plus community with the characters of Andrew and Eric, and the homophobia that characters like Redmond actually represent. I thought that it felt like really forced. Like that whole bar sequence felt really rushed to me. And at this point, like I'm I'm saying this as a fan of the Harry Potter franchise. I think we've all seen the acting chops that Daniel Radcliffe can do, and like just the absolutely like bonkers career decisions that he's made, from Guns Akimbo to
Guns Akimbo is so freaking nuts and awesome.
To last year's Weird and Swiss Army Man. Like he's just done so many like weird cinematic choices, and he's crushed at every one. And I think that like now we're starting to enter into this age where we're starting to see that from Rupert Grint. But I also think that like unfortunately this movie is just not a good showcase for his character, and it really misses the ball with getting to explore some of the source material's deeper rooted mental health themes.
Yeah, and what they did instead of having his character be like you're describing from the book, they ended up having which was the survivor, was that Dad Andrew?
Daddy Andrew, Daddy Andrew,
Okay.
played wonderfully by Ben Aldridge.
They ended up having him in most cases either outright saying or hinting that this was all because they were gay,
Which I think is a really interesting thing, because and I'm speaking, and I'm going to say this strictly as a heterosexual cisgender male, and I think this is such a fascinating uh commentary that this story brings out, to where here you have essentially the four horsemen of the apocalypse approaching a gay couple to say make a sacrifice to save the rest of the world. And when you look at how the world has treated, the large number of the world has treated the LGBTQIA plus community over the years, and like to where like tolerance and equal rights for that group has only been a thing in like the last 10 years. It seems like it makes it a really interesting commentary, to where it's like, all right, well, if the world didn't care about me until like 10 years ago, why should I care about the world now? I think it's such a fascinating juxtaposition that this story presents.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that in the movie and the way they did it. I didn't read the book, which you seem to be gleefully book shaming me about.
I'm not because I think this movie also captures that, to where like you definitely see it. And like again, it's very much hinted at with like the Redmond subplot in here. But I think that this movie like definitely is a very strong commentary and like interesting concept of like, what if you approached a largely alienated and hated subsection of humanity and asked them to sacrifice themselves for the rest of humanity? It would be like asking anyone to essentially like kill themselves so that their enemies could live.
Well, when you put it like that, and you're big into Christianity and thing worship and all that stuff, you could very easily tie that back to the crucifixion. He was shunned by the churches, or by the leaders and a lot of society, and executed simply for being who he was. Am I comparing them to him? No, but it's the same kind of decision that had to be made.
Sure. I mean, if you're gonna like, I don't want to like get into this because like there's a large theological debate that could be had. Um, but I think it's such an interesting. That's one of the more interesting aspects of this story that I think that you're absolutely right. Like it is definitely it definitely steps in line with the biblical subtones of this movie to where Eric even says at the end of the movie that like Leonard, Sabrina, Redmond, and Adrian all represented the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? To where like it is like an impending thing that is like going, and you're essentially like having to make a sacrifice willingly. um and I really like that this story like constantly emphasizes that it has to be like willing, because that really doubles down on like the subtext of what you're talking about with Christianity, because like Jesus actually does state in the book of John in the Bible that no one takes my life from me. I lay it down willingly of my own accord. No one can take my life. I lay it down and pick it up at my leisure. Essentially, it's paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he talks about. And I think that by having Ben or Andrew and Eric face this kind of almost messianic uh, kind of situation, that it presents a really interesting angle. And it's also really interesting that you know these two guys just happen to also be part of the LGBTQIA plus community, which is largely had its own friction with the church as a whole.
Yeah, and I have my own thoughts on that statement, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, same.
It comes down to kind of put it simply, it's not mankind's right to judge for the sake of Christianity. That's left to God after you die, not
Yeah.
the church. So there shouldn't be any friction there. It should be welcome to the church to worship, not what we have in some cases,
Yeah.
because it's not their right to make that judgment and decision. But one thing that ultimate, they have to decide who's going to die and kill him. They're also having to put aside their own experiences and essentially humanity to decide the fate of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's what plays into the drama of we're not going to do that, is because they're having to decide between being who they are and their humanity and their lives and their experiences to save people they don't even know. And in some cases, people just hate them for being them.
Yeah, and I think that again, to bring back the whole Redmond subplot, I think that's a great example of I I can't remember what movie I was recently watching, but there's I was recently watching Harley Quinn. I've been going back through that series on HBO Max, and there's a phrase, or there's a quote from the first season that says people fear what they don't understand. And I think that largely that's the reason why you have that friction there, and uh, is because like we do fear what we don't understand.
Well, that's also a very common phrase or sentiment. You hear that everywhere. Not so. I mean, it sounds stupid, but I had a friend a few years ago along that same line. He was big into rap and hip hop and everything, and I talked him into going to a Ministry concert. He had never been to a metal show, or in the case of them, industrial metal. And he was actually scared going in. He's like, "Is it just full of a bunch of racists and everything?" I was like, "No." And we left, and his fear actually within half hour went out the window. And he's like, "Dude, this is the greatest thing ever. I need to go to another show." And he was
Yeah.
scared to go because he didn't understand what that community was. And he
Yeah.
had never been through that experience. And after he went, it was like, "Oh my God, that was amazing."
Yeah, so I've established by this point on the podcast that I grew up in a mostly conservative Christian household, and
So did I.
there are two instances in my life where I've had experiences with people around me like that. The first was when I started getting into, it's going to show my age, but when I started getting into like the Warped Tour scene with like heavier music, Hot Topic was like the place to be. And my mom, like, I remember the first time my mom ever went in there, like my mom was terrified because it's all dark. They played loud, screamy music, and like she just didn't understand it. And then like she was like kind of like really, I don't want to say like judgmental, but like, there's piercings, there's tattoos everywhere, and Hot Topic back in the day was very atmospheric. And my mom was just like, man, like terrified to go in there. And then once, like the first time, like we went in there together, she's like, oh, she's like, it's chill. And the same thing like that happened when I started getting into like horror movies and like the horror scene is like I had a lot of the people that I grew up around in where I grew up that like in that conservative circles were like, why are you watching things like The Exorcist and Hellraiser? And honestly, like I love the horror community. I feel like the horror community is like super like understanding, and they're like really just welcoming. And I think because you have something that like demonic possession or like serial killers, like we just unfortunately happen to get a bad rap because like we like watching that stuff.
Well, I mean, there's kind of an ongoing joke because I'm a fairly hardcore gamer, and there's a hardcore kind of a joke with the what they call the Bloodborne series, not Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne, and the newest one's Elden Ring, and then there's a whole genre of that kind of super hard and punishing game. And there's like an ongoing joke. You come home from a stressful day of work and put on a video game that's just going to crush you to relax. And it's like you just don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. So I'm not gonna fate.
So it's the same kind of idea. You may have a stressful work week and you turn around and put on a horror movie where people are getting like murdered and mutilated in various ways by different creatures or people. And it's can be relaxing for a lot of people, which makes absolutely no sense because it shouldn't be that way.
And I mean, also like let's like talk about it too, because like while there are like growing concerns about like the mental health quote unquote aspects and like impacts of like violent video games, horror movies, and metal music, like all things that like both of us are into, there are just as much, if not more, like scientific evidence and studies that have been done saying about like the positive effects that things like horror movies and thrillers and violent video games and like they have on your
Yeah.
like psyche. Like
Yeah, there's actually quite a few studies have been done that um, they're kind of baffled by the fact that people who are into heavy metal and these violent games and movies tend to be happier people overall and better able to cope with negative emotions than people that are into like pop or country or hip hop and the that kind of style that goes with them.
yeah. I don't remember how we ended up here, but
Rambling
uh
like usual.
yeah, knock at the cabin. How did you feel about the like the four horsemen of the apocalypse aspect of it.
It made sense, especially when you watch how it was almost ritualistic execution when they would take out each other. It kind of made sense. It was interesting. I don't think it was so much of a twist as some people might think it is. Um, I know my wife would with me to see it. She wasn't too fond of, oh, they represented the better aspects of mankind. She wasn't too fond of what they chose there. She thought that was
Which,
kind of dumb, but
yeah, I thought was interesting because like typically like the four horsemen of the apocalypse are supposed to represent like what is it? Famine,
war,
pestilence,
death,
and war and
famine.
death.
Yeah.
So like you have these like really like aggressively negative aspects, and then here on the flip side, like one of them, I think Sabrina represented healing. You had Adrian represent nurturing. You had Leonard, and I don't remember what Leonard or Redmond represented, but you had like the four like corners of like the best of humanity. I thought that was such an interesting aspect.
I feel like Redmond would have been more along the lines of death or war.
No, no, they all represented it like um positive thoughts and like emotions. I think Leonard, if I remember correctly, might have actually represented like optis. Oh, why can't I speak today?
Optimism.
Optimism, yeah. Because like I think there's a great scene to prove that too. Is like where he's they're all kind of like talking and like giving their own backstories and stuff like that, and he pulls out this 5x7 photograph of him and the basketball league that he coaches, and he does both males and females, and he's like describing like the males are 3 and 8, and then the females are 5 and 7. So like they don't have really good like stats, and he like acknowledges that, and he's like, but for them it's not about winning or losing, it's about the community or something to that aspect. And he like you can always kind of see the positive that he has and embodies. I think that sequence like really is a great example of his optimism in life, and his
Well,
persistence as well.
I was talking about Redmond
I know.
because of how aggressive and everything he was from the get go. I think he would have fallen under the either war or death, being as violent and quick to attack as he was.
So so typically I pulled up an article right now to just kind of like showcase and see if I could find what the interpretation of this is. So Redmond would represent malice, and then you'd also have nurture, which would have been Adrian. Sabrina was healing, and then Leonard represented guidance, which is very true because like when you like look at him throughout the entirety of the movie. But I think it's interesting too that like of all of these characteristics, like the characterization of Redmond is a redemption story. Like, yes, he's like still a little bit rough and a little bit aggressive, but at the heart of it, the way that his story is told is it's a little bit of a redemption story, to where here you have a guy that is a reformed criminal that essentially was just like trying to get his life back together at this point. But you can definitely still see that like he's not reformed enough, because like when they address the fact that Eric and Andrew are a same-sex couple, he doesn't like say anything about it being an issue. Like whereas like Leonard and Sabrina and Adrian all talk about how they don't have a homophobic bone in their body, or that they don't have hatred or bigotry all he says is that one threw us for a surprise. And so I think that with his character in particular, while he has done his best to reform his own life, he hasn't done the best to actually reform his opinions on the people group that he was previously prejudiced against.
Yeah, but it also doesn't mean he's actually reformed. He just kind of got tied up with these people because they were all having the same visions.
That's also very fair too.
So there's nothing there to indicate that he's reformed or gone for the better at all.
I think a portion of his story is that he is reformed to where like now he's a metro worker. And this article also says he's a reformed criminal, but I think for himself, I think he views himself as a redemption story. And I can definitely understand that aspect, but I think that his his vantage point on certain topics are definitely still the same as they were when he was in his criminal heyday.
I mean, is it still a redemption story if you're not changing?
I think it's still aspects of it. Like I think that like it's not a 100% aspect it's not a traditional, but I think that in his eyes he views himself as a redeemed man. It's kind of like when you have a villain and they view themselves as the hero of this story, like Thanos.
Or Ozymandias was who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, as a whole, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty good. Was it great? No, but it was fun. It was entertaining. It was good to see that kind of post-apocalyptic kind of story play out the way it was, or soon to be post-apocalyptic. Um, so
Yeah.
it was actually honestly it was better than I thought it was going to be. I didn't have much. It was one I kind of. It wasn't like Megan, where I completely hated Megan going in and hated Megan even more coming out. This I had seen. It was kind of like, okay, this could be good. It could be bad. Whatever. I didn't really have many expectations for it, and it kind of ended up being better than I was suspecting it would be.
I had expectations simply for Batista because reading the source material, I was like, as I was like reading, I was like, oh man, like I can't wait to see Dave Bautista like sink his teeth into this role. And absolutely, like I walked away. Batista was the highlight of this movie for me. I think overall, I think it has really interesting commentaries. That while we've talked about it, I still don't really feel qualified like talking and addressing it. Um, because it is from a sect of humanity that I, I can try my best to like understand, but not being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, I'll never truly understand the ridicule and the hatred that this film explores, um, nor the bigotry. Um, and but I think I walked away from this movie wishing I had probably read the book afterwards. I think that's my biggest takeaway is because this movie absolutely just like the book is so much better. Like
That's Kate's thing. She says the same thing. If we're going to see a movie that's based on a book, she hopes she hasn't read the book first, and that's a common thing with readers. They would prefer to see the movie before reading the book because you're going in with expectations from the book that the movie's not going to have.
and I think that like my opinion on this movie would have been differently if this movie wasn't an hour and a half. I feel like this movie jumps in to this, just like the book does. It jumps in really quick, and then it like once the first act and kind of like once the Eric and Andrew are face to face with Batista and the gang, I feel like the movie kind of like comes to this like stopping ground, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just I really wish that the movie would have gotten a little bit deeper with these characters that the book did. Essentially, it's a very simplified version of the story with an alternate ending.
Yeah, and they tend to cut out a lot of that backstory, inside story from books to kind of streamline the main story. And that's
Like
pretty much what my guess is that's what they did here.
they did. And this is the first movie that I feel like I've seen in a long time that I'm walking away from this and being like, I would have absolutely loved to see a director's cut of this movie. Like I didn't hate it that much. Like I'm genuinely curious to see what else they could have done. And also, I want to ask you this because I initially thought the way this movie handled the deaths of the four horsemen as a sect of humanity has been judged like right before they essentially like get killed. I thought this movie was rated PG-13. And then once they gave us the second and third F bombs, I was like, oh, this movie is rated R. I feel like this movie like should have been bloodier than what it was. Like the horror fan in me is like, why are they cutting away for these deaths? Like that's the thing that really, really bothered me. I like gore in movies, and so I don't know if you like that or what you thought about that.
Yeah. Was it rated R?
It was. It was rated R, and I think it was only rated R for
The F bombs.
the language. Yeah, that's the only cuss words that they say in this movie too.
I think the movie was trying to make a point, and that point didn't involve blood and gore.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, it was rated radar for violence in language, but you don't really ever see the violence on this. And I feel like that was kind of like my big takeaway was I was like,
Did you
why?
ever did you ever really see the blood and gore and violence in Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
You didn't, but this is also 2023 where to bring up Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have last year's bus sequence, one of the best sequences in any horror movie made in the 2020s. And I don't know, like I really felt like
so about that scene, I just love the fact that there were so many people standing around with their cell phones going, oh my God, look at this going on. And like they're getting slaughtered. He's like, I'm gonna take it. And how often do we actually see that in the news or on social media?
yeah,
Somebody getting the bejesus beat out of them, people standing around with phones looking and laughing.
yeah. Um,
That's
I,
what
I
made that scene great for me. Take them all out.
make one move and you're canceled, bro. What is this? I think that like I understood why they didn't show Leonard's death, but like also I don't know.
His was actually the most graphic of the bunch.
It was. Yeah. And like I mean his death in the book is like it's even more graphic. Um yeah, I don't know. I walked away from this movie like really encouraging people if you liked this movie, please go read the book. Paul Tremblay is a great author, and I honestly like I feel like home invasion stories are something that has to be done really well. Like I don't think that like everything can be the strangers, but there has to be like a good emotional connection between me and the source material to really get me to like it. And I feel like this movie did a decent job, but the book did a better job.
I don't, as odd as it sounds, I don't feel like it was the home invasion. I felt like it was more of an end times impending doom movie than a home invasion. Even
Interesting.
the, excuse me, like I said earlier, like we said earlier, I think we're both having colds right now. So pardon my hacking and coughing. It seemed more of an end times movie than a home invasion. Yes, there was the home invasion at the very beginning, but I think part of that kind of goes out the window with the introduction of Leonard the way they do. Um, and it doesn't play out like a home invasion. It I mean, you look at Hush. I think what was it called, Hush? With
Yeah.
the deaf girl in the woods, in the house in the woods. That was a home invasion. The Strangers was a home invasion. So that's kind of the way I saw it. I didn't see it as a home invasion, just
That's
because
interesting.
the invasion isn't the underlying theme of the movie.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Is there anything else that you want to touch on in this movie? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
I think it's better that it's advertised to be. I don't think it's going to get its fair shake because the commercials, the trailers that have come out kind of show the same couple sequences, just in different orders or different clips from those sequences. And I don't think it's going to get the fair kind of viewing that it should get in the theater.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
And Batista's jeans were way too tight. It made him look funny.
What?
This big giant dude in borderline skinny jeans was kind of weird looking.
I don't know how to take that. Okay. Um. Uh. All right. On that note, yeah. Where can people find you online, sir?
I've actually been updating Instagram on Titanium Juggernaut painting. Getting a project up there I've been working on, adventures into 3D printing.
Well, yay. You guys can find me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. It's probably the only platform I'm actually active on. But you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And of course, wherever you guys get your podcast from. Be sure that you guys also subscribe to our home feed as well. It's Abyss Gazing, wherever you guys get your podcast from, because we are no longer on the Victims and Villains feed. But we're going to put on our boogie shoes and remember that the next time that the more that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.